Thank you. I had a question for Secretary Sanders, but I can hold on that if you'd like.
This is a good time. Go ahead.
This is a good time. Okay. Secretary Sanders, in your testimony, you talked about, and I think you made the statement that we're happy to be fully reopened, right, in North Carolina. And I wrote that down, and I think that there's a lot of business owners I know in my district that would beg to differ about that, because they can't fully reopen, because they can't hire the people that they need to fully reopen. I hear about it very often. The impact of not being able to retain and hire employees that they had pre the pandemic has been crippling and very frustrating. How do we get back to where we were and help these businesses, small and large businesses, be able to hire back the people that they had before? And my second question on that is, it's also been this idea of the essential business. And I think, that's troubling to me, because I'm a small business owner, and I think any business owner believes that their business is quite essential. And do we have any data for the forced closure, temporary closure from the pandemic of non-essential businesses that ended up being permanent closures of businesses that were deemed non-essential? And how many of those are minority-owned or female-owned businesses?
Secretary Sanders.
Yes, to your first question, with reference to companies that are reopening and having those challenges, I should clarify and say that companies can reopen, and I understand the staffing challenges that they are encountering. As we've talked today, the number one way to get back to business is to have people vaccinated or take the precautions as Secretary Cohen has discussed throughout today with the mask. So we believe that vaccination is the number one. Vaccinations are actually a solution to a robust economy. And then secondly, with reference to the non-essentials, that companies that have been forced to close, I will have to get back to you on that data. What we do know is that minority women-owned businesses, small businesses, have been impacted greatly during this time. That is one of the reasons, or the primary reason, why when I was at DOA, we created Retool NC, which was to direct funds towards our minority women-owned businesses that were not, did not receive the funding or access that was needed through some of the loans that were available. And based on the data, we saw the significant impact of those companies to even maintain their services, whether that was to purchase equipment or to help with paying some of the rent that was needed, or whatever those needs were. As far as the specifics on those numbers, I will get back with you on that. I do not have that available.
Mr. Chairman, may I add to that, just from Representative Paré? I apologize. A couple things. Just the note on the designation of essential business. That is a clunky term, and it's not a good one, but it comes from the federal government. So you look at the Department of Homeland Security, they keep a list that they call the essential business list, which became the basis for the stay-at-home order. So while the nomenclature is unfortunate and not very good, it's based upon what the federal government sends down. The Cooper administration set up a system through DOR to try and fix this as best we could, but it wasn't an easy way to go, and I don't think that it was fair to all businesses, obviously. And then to speak on the labor market, if I could, for just a moment, it's important to remember, and I think Dr. Connaughton talked about this, we had a tight labor market before the pandemic. We were at very low unemployment, and if you look at where we were then compared to now, we've recovered almost all those jobs, and our labor force participation number is down maybe 2 percentage points. So we'd love to get those 2 percentage points back and even go beyond that, but we've been hovering at fairly low labor force participation for a very long time, and the barriers to that remain the same whether we're in a pandemic or not, and that is workforce training, which the Secretary works a lot on, access to child care, access to education, all the things that I think this body spends a lot of time talking about so that we can get a steady pipeline of people into the workforce. And if you look at reports that we've had done by the Council of Women in particular, we know that working mothers have had the hardest time getting back into the workforce compared to, for example, working fathers or people with young children. And that's because, in all likelihood, they've been called upon to do quite a bit of child care at home. That's it's unemployed, but it doesn't mean you're not working. I think, that's a lot of work. So we've got a lot of work to do on all these fronts to get that labor market where we want it to be. But we had tight labor before the pandemic.
Just to follow up on that, the term essential business or essential worker, perhaps, the word essential, but the definition of essential, that was state-driven, correct? So what an essential business is, for example, we own a small business. We were deemed essential because we sell bicycles and we repair bicycles, and that was a mode of transportation. So you're telling me that definition of essential business was uniform across the country, or?
Well, I don't know about uniform across the country, but the list that was generated for the order came from the federal government. It's a list that's kept at the Department of Homeland Security.
So there was no leeway in the governor's order in what he, for North Carolina, deemed as an essential business.
No, there was a system. If you were a business and felt like you were essential, you could petition, and we publicize this a lot, you could petition to DOR to get that application approved, and I don't know the statistics on that. I know they approved a lot of businesses pretty quickly.
Yeah. It was heartbreaking in our shopping center that we were an essential business and allowed to stay open because we sold and repaired bicycles, but a minority-owned business right next door lost their complete livelihood and had to shut down permanently just because they weren't essential. And I do want to make a comment about the improvement we're seeing in the economy right now, which you touched on before, which is good news. However, I want to make the point and restate the point that Senator Johnson, it is well documented and pretty clear on the record that it's been 10 years, a decade of strong leadership in the General Assembly on regulatory reform, tax reform, budget strategies that really led North Carolina to weather the COVID storm at the end better than probably any other state in the nation. So that is a good story to tell, and I wanted to make mention of that and note of that today in this opportunity. Might have an additional question if there's time for Mr. Lilly, but I will hand it over back to you.
Thank you.